welcome. I'm Paul Freedman. I'm the founder of Entangled Ventures, and I am the moderator for this panel. The panel is entitled The New World of Learning at Work. And one of our first questions will be, what does that mean? I'm joined with an esteemed group of panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves, starting at my left.
All right, hi, I'm Kevin Johnson, CEO of Udemy. You could ignore the former CEO of Ebates up there. It's all about education now, not cashback shopping. Udemy is a thriving online marketplace that has really two businesses, a direct-to-consumer market where we connect 35,000 instructors with 20 million students around the world. And we also have a B2B business where a subset of our courses are provided on a subscription basis to 1,500 corporations and governments around the world.
David Blake, I'm the co-founder and executive chairman at Degreed. And Degreed is a platform. Its genesis was when you ask people, tell me about your education, they tell you where they went to university. And that is a reflection of the fact that we can't answer for what we're learning on an ongoing basis. Degreed is a platform that allows individuals and corporations to track all of their informal lifelong learning.
Hi everyone, my name is Carol Leaman. I'm the CEO of Axonify. Axonify is an adaptive micro-learning platform that has a unique combination of gamification, brain science, cognitive science, and personalized learning that delivers a 3 to 5 minute learning experience every day that dramatically changes the employee behavior quickly, that we then tie to the business outcome like sales or expense reduction.
Hello everyone, my name is Leah, Jewell, and I'm the Managing Director for Employability Solutions at Pearson. And what that means is that we build out learning solutions for students in high school, higher ed, and adult learning throughout their lives, all in the effort to try to help them be the best prepared that they can possibly be for the careers that they're going to have throughout their lives.
Hi, and I'm Adam Medros. I'm the president and COO of edX. edX is a organization that represents 140 universities globally and to 15 million learners, teaching them everything from basic math and science courses to data science and programming skills.
Great. And as I said at the top, the title of the panel is The New World of Learning at Work, which is a great panel for ASU GSV event because it's exciting and interesting, but I really have no idea what it means, and that's dangerous because I'm the moderator. So, help me. Kevin, what is this new world of learning at work?
All right, I'll help you. I'll make it up as we go along. So I think the way to capture the shift, at least the most extreme, is to think about 10 or 20 years ago when you thought about learning at work was really from a training focus from the company standpoint. And certainly when I started out, which was sadly more than 10 or 20 years ago, I didn't go in thinking, oh, it's great, I can't wait for that company training coming my way. But things have really shifted in terms of how employees think about professional development at work today. And in some ways, it's completely flipped. Yes, there still is corporate training, but most employees today entering the workforce come in expecting professional development as they go, and that will be part of the job and part of what actually excites them about the job and keeps them motivated. I think, in fact, Gallup did a poll last year and found that 87% of millennials expected professional development on the job. So that's what, to me, really captures that shift, is that learning at work has shifted from a company-push training focus to an employee demand learning focus.
Okay, so that's defining the new world really being driven on behalf of the employee. David, what's the employer perspective on the new world? Are they just reacting to it, or are they driving the new world as well?
I think one of the things when we started with the individual. We believe learning needs to be lifelong, and that meant we had to start with the individual. But as we got into corporations, one of the things we saw was companies are spending, companies, when you look at how they're spending their money, LMSs, instructor-led training, flying people around the world for trainings and sessions, they're buying content, and so it might be an e-learning library, putting programming in front of people. And so 100% of their budget is going into sort of online or in-person systems. And when you zoom out, so 100% of their budget is going here, but when you zoom out and look at how are people learning, well, a majority of how people learn anymore is happening over here. So they're spending 100% of their time, energy, and money on sort of a subset of the learning, when so much of the learning is now it's bled outside of the walls of the organization. And so corporate training now has to broaden. If you are going to think about development, if you're going to think about skills, if you're going to think about learning, it can't just be about the company's sort of box anymore. It's got to think bigger. And so I think companies didn't know how to bridge between that. So that was the big question for companies. But I think they're proactive. They're more than just reacting to it. I think they wanted and needed a solution, and bridging to that future is sort of the phase we're in right now.
Yeah. So I'm still not clear on sort of what's changed. Is it the employee who's changed? Is it the nature of work that's changed? Is it the capability of training content that's changed? I mean, what's the driving factor, Carol?
I think it's actually all of those things. So I think Pearson summarized it best a couple of years ago in a white paper that they published around the characteristics of the modern learner. So in that piece, they talked about how modern learners are overwhelmed. We're mobile and untethered. We literally only have about 1% of our work week to devote to learning, and we need information that is personalized to us in that moment of need. It is no longer okay to pull people into a room once a year, fire hose them with tons of information, and then expect them to be happy employees doing a great job. So that has changed. Companies are getting on the train, but certainly in our experience, we're still in that kind of early adopter phase of having them figure out how to do it. How do you best meet the needs of the modern learner? And so there's still a lot of confusion out there about the changing landscape and how best to take what they know needs to happen and put it into practice at work. But the needs are definitely there.
Yeah, and Leah, you work with a lot of companies sort of figuring this all out. What's with all these pressures that the previous panelists have described, driving a new need for a new nature of learning at work? How are employers grappling with that? How are they putting it together?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of different components to it, but one of the things that's interesting to me that I see out there is that the employers are starting to actually define, sort of change the definition of the job roles, and what they're starting to do now is they're actually really defining them at a much more micro level around skills. And I think that in and of itself is going to start to change both how people are educated when they first come into the job and also how they're going to be educated once they're already on the job and throughout their whole lives, because the degree is still really important, don't get me wrong, but I think we all know and have seen and read and experienced this ourselves that it's no longer the de facto endorsement for skills and job readiness, right? But to get out of that, you have to actually have the employer start to send the signal around, well, then what is going to be important? What is going to replace that? And one of the things that we're seeing corporations do is actually define the jobs at the skill level. That's going to change the training that happens. That's going to change. I hope it changes sort of how academia looks at it. But that's one of the biggest, I think, trends that we're starting to see.
And sort of competency or skill-based job definitions. Certainly, it's the way people typically think about training or jobs as around the competency rather than sort of another proxy. Kevin, since your business initially started, if I understand it correctly, as a marketplace for individual-led courses, providing courses directly, and then grew into the corporate opportunity. Has that companies coming around to a more traditional understanding of how skills are developed position you well? Is that how the courses were being built by individuals when they built the courses themselves?
Sorry. Yeah, I think for edX, certainly we started with university-driven type of curriculum. But what you see increasingly is that corporations want to augment the work that their employees are doing with new skills that are emerging, right? Where better to find this combination of practical experience, hands-on, people doing the work every day, and sort of theoretical or more academic approach to the learning. So melding the two of those things together, giving their learners a sort of a solid foundation and a solid base in theory, and then allowing them to practice it day to day, I think is really a great mechanism for corporations.
Good, and I think we've touched on a lot of themes that we'll return to: competency-based hiring, whether the degree matters. What are you actually signaling? But let me ask to Adam and Kevin. Let me ask you a sort of more personal question. You guys just came into this space having worked in previous jobs. You still says former on there, so it's new enough that still matters. What were you thinking? This has not been an area of sector of phenomenal venture or equity returns. What was so exciting about the opportunity that you sort of left greener grasses to come here?
Yeah, perhaps I missed that class of business school, but I never have really chosen a job based on projected equity returns, and instead done what's most attractive to me to learn, and where I think I can have the most impact, and also where I think the mission is most important. So truly, I was not running away from my previous job. I was attracted to Udemy because of the mission, really to promote lifelong learning and to set out to build this global marketplace where we could connect instructors around the world with students around the world.
And Adam, were you running away from your other job?
No, but similar story. I think I had the pleasure of working on with a company in an industry where we got to really revolutionize and sort of democratize an entire industry from the ground up, based on user feedback, based on the ability to deliver content and community faster via the internet. I think education is right at that place now where it hasn't quite happened yet, but it's poised to do that. And so the opportunity to go reinvent yet another industry, and a big one that's global in nature and has such a huge impact on human life, that was too hard to pass up for me.
And when we do this panel again in 5 years, we can revisit whether that was a good decision.
Yeah, the return's going to happen. Don't worry.
So I think we touched on a lot at the first set of questions. We touched on a lot of the pressures that are defining the new world and sort of what employers are reacting to and what kind of employees are looking for. But at this point in time, what matters most to employers with regard to training? Is it training technical skills? Is it softer impact skills? Do they not care about the training? They care about skill signaling? Is it assessment? Do they just want a customized learning solution to allow their employees to do their work better? Leah, what's your perspective on what matters most in this new world?
Yeah, I think what we hear when they're looking for people initially, that there's sort of that old phrase that you get hired for your technical skills, but you get fired for your soft skills, right? But actually, I think what we're starting to see is actually they're even looking less and less at the technical skills because they're saying we can do that ourselves. Like we'll actually provide the training. We already know what we want to do anyway at the corporation. So we care that you have some level of proficiency, but that's actually maybe not even the number one thing that we're going to look at. And I do think it comes back down to soft skills, power skills, whatever you want to call them. Collaboration, mindset, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, all of those kinds of things. And we're starting to see that play out because more and more employers are actually implementing assessments, pre-hire assessments. And the pre-hire assessments are almost exclusively around the soft skills. They're really not really around the hard skills. So I think that the challenge there, though, is that as most people know, those are hard to train, they're hard to demonstrate, and then they're hard to signal, right? And so that's the other challenge that's happening on the employer side, is being able to understand beyond an interview, does somebody have those skills? How are they able to demonstrate that to us? And then they'll go in and train them for the hard skills when they get on board.
Carol, you seen the same thing, sort of an increasing focus on soft skills primarily?
So my experience is a little bit different. I come at it from a different perspective, and it's largely because of who we deal with. I'll tell you what our customers care about: business outcomes. They care about, we have people for a very short period of time today. The average life expectancy of an employee in terms of their tenure at work is shorter than it's ever been. for the amount of time that we have them, we need that person to do things that are going to do one of two things: drive revenue or reduce expenses, period. How do we get those people to be as effective as possible so that I know for that short period of time they're going to maximize my business opportunity? That we hear that over and over and over again. There's a disillusionment with the effectiveness of historical learning and the ability to tie all that money spent to what you're really there to do, which is be a successful business. And that is the biggest pain that we hear over and over and over again. That's their focus now.
It's a real ROI problem now.
It's an ROI
and the new
problem.
world is driven by the fact that historical training didn't work.
Yeah.
David, you guys work with a lot of employers. If it's an ROI problem, how are they even tracking ROI on training? And if it's not an ROI problem, then what do you think is driving the?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me that sounded actually like a really dismal sort of assessment of learning. I mean, and work. Like, I think the future of work. I mean, that's terribly depressing to me to think that the only thing that companies care about are maximizing revenue or eliminating costs in a business. Like, I don't want to work for that company. And I actually don't think that most people coming out of university today do either. Like, I think, the future is one where we have to solve problems that we, haven't yet encountered and we don't see coming. And I think, the world of work I thrive in and that I think most people aspire to is one where, you're out there solving big problems and you're creating a lot of value, and that's often, but not necessarily, and certainly not immediately, always correlates to income or expenses. And so, I mean, I would reframe it. I think, really, and two, I think that's a very systematic way of framing sort of the problem, driving revenue and eliminating expenses, which would lead to a very systematic way of training people. I think, that is largely the world as it has been, but I think we are moving to a world where, really there's a shift in sort of the relationship that we have between our employer and our employment. Part of the reason why it is diminishing, it's 4.2 years is the last US census, is the average duration. Part of the reason it's getting so small is because my personal mission isn't hitched to a corporate mission often for all that very long. And I have a personal mission that I am going to pursue, and it is broader and bigger than the arcs of many corporate missions. Now, sort of that tour of duties, I join a company, I can serve their mission, they can help serve mine for a time. But I'm on a mission. I think most people in today's workforce are. And you've got to begin to frame the question of lifelong learning. We have to begin to frame the question of training to individuals' personal missions. The individual is their mission, sort of their objectives, has to eventually come to be sort of the thing that is oriented in this question bigger than the corporate profits or the corporate sort of expenses, because it is starting to happen. So if I have the choice of working at a company that's going to help me and my mission, achieve my objectives, achieve my goals, or I can work for a company that is going to use me to accomplish theirs, the market, the economy is starting to sort itself out. The most attractive employers are the ones who will help their people accomplish their personal missions. Now, that is uncomfortable, because all of a sudden that frames the question where we are having to spend time and money and resources to help people accomplish something beyond our own immediate objectives, beyond our own immediate revenues. And companies are not accustomed to doing that. They are not accustomed to spending their dollars to help their employees accomplish the employees' objectives. But that's the new deal. That's the new equation. And it's shifting that way, and we have to. So what that means is you have to begin to identify, where there is alignment between personal mission and the corporate mission. You have to have transparency around what the employees' goals and objectives are. Otherwise, you won't be able to meet them well. And so I think that's, and that's a real tension in the marketplace right now. That isn't a comfortable thing to be, to go and have a conversation with a lot of companies, but I think that's the new reality.
But you're such an idealistic person. I hope I believe it. Maybe you can continue to convince me. At the end of the day, though, the company's in business to do business, and they're ultimately driven by whether there's a return on their investment for activities in training, and they're not a university which could have a greater mission. That being said, Kevin, I saw you doing a lot of head nodding while David was talking. That we sort of presented two different perspectives came up to some degree. Is that there were two different data points that I'd like to poke at, which is one data point is that employees have this longer term vision, and so an employer has to invest in their personal mission across their lives. The other data point is that the half-life on any job is decreasing, and millennials are expected to have as many as 20 different careers in their life. And so, if you're training somebody to work at a different career. What's your perspective on how this reconcile if they do?
I was nodding. I share a slightly rosier view as well. Maybe not the full optimism, but I think there's a balance out there, and I like to think that we've sort of achieved that with what we provide. I think that in terms of the old model of go to school for 25 years and then work for 35 is obviously completely defunct at this point. And the pace of technical change and work change is so rapid now that you need to continually educate yourself. And I think today's workers realize that, and companies realize that as well. And it's not as if these are completely opposed goals. And you can certainly, whether you have a mission-driven company or not, it's easier if you have a mission-driven company and you can bring people in, align them with your mission, and their learning supports yours. That's sort of nirvana. But even short of that, you can be providing training that meets company goals, both hard and soft skills, and make someone a better, more engaged employee. And in fact, we like to think we don't have the data yet, we're too young to prove it, but we know that we've got higher engagement, higher satisfaction when people are using our learning platform within a company. And in fact, their impression of the company and of their own learning and development and HR department goes up because of the learning they're receiving. And so we hope that 4.2 years starts to expand as that person sees, I'm developing within the company. I don't have to go somewhere else to pursue my mission. I'm pursuing that right here within the company. And then if the company can, as I said, nirvana, if you can align that mission with your own as a company.
Right, and there's a spectrum here on the nature of training, too. Is it very job-oriented, or is it higher-level cognitive, thinking that can span across different jobs and different careers? Adam, your work is sort of, the company took that life cycle, working higher education institutions, and now increasingly, with corporate training. But it's at least as I understand it, it's the kind of more of the higher level, kind of leadership-oriented rather than task-oriented training programs. That type of training requires time and space that might not be connected to job functions. Are you finding employers willing to give employees that kind of time and space?
I think employers are recognizing more so this contract that they have with their employees, which is to give them opportunities to explore things that are both directly related to their job and things that the employee believes are going to make them a better employee. And so I think it's really up to employees to find the time, but the nature of the courses we provide and the workspace that most of these people are in is that you increasingly have control over your time and your day and figuring out how to best deliver your work. I don't think that this is any different than traditional things that you'd see in companies like book groups and seminars and that type of thing. It's just a different mode of delivering information.
Well, I guess one way to ask the question is, if all job functions are requiring sort of more types of training and more, higher level thinking, you would expect then for employees to be given more free time to pursue training. Are we seeing that, Leah? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we're thinking about it very binary, right? Either we're putting people in a giant room for their training class, or we're freeing time but letting them be sort of free-range learners, right? And I think that it's a little more fluid than that is ultimately the answer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Adam. I don't think it's about, I took a course and now I'm and now I'm good to go, and that course took a certain amount of time. I think it's, especially the transferable skills, those are skills that you learn over the course of your life, right? And so you're just gonna have to find different ways to develop those skills, demonstrate those skills, signal those skills, but the learning is gonna come in a lot of different ways over the course of a longer period of time. And I think that the learner does actually now, and the worker has a lot more control over that pathway, right? I mean, corporate training was, which was the standard, was all about the corporation owning what happened to you. But now the power really is in the hands of the worker. And the second that happens, not only does that shift the mindset of the employer, but it shifts the mindset of the worker, right? Because now the worker says, okay, actually what I want to do is I'm going to go figure this thing out, or I want to go learn this. And they may get help from their employer to do that. They may not get help from their employer to do that. And what that looks like will determine whether the employee stays, doesn't stay, whether they're happy, they're not happy. But they have the employee has a lot more control over what they want to do, way more than they ever had before.
Okay. So I'm kind of presented with two views. So Carol, I'm going to go back to you. Presented with a view that the nature of learning at work now is more free-floating, more employee-driven. On the other hand, your perspective you started with that, I think resonates, is that that the employers are very focused on outcomes, and they're questioning training budgets because before it hasn't worked before. So how do you reconcile this? How would you even, how do the companies that you're working with that are focused on, outcomes, how are they tracking all this sort of free-floating pathways of education?
So it is a balance. I agree with what both David and Kevin said. It is a balance. You have to, as one corporate CEO of a large multinational said to me recently, our business is not the United Way. We're here to compete on a global scale against other competitors to be the winner. And I would like to understand how we can best achieve that through the performance of people. But at the same time, there is an understanding that you want to keep employees as long as possible. You want to create an environment where they can access information at the point of need wherever and whenever they have the inclination to do that. So organizations are on that train of making, I mean, we all have a mobile device in our pocket and we use Google a lot to find anything. If you can create a situation inside your company where they can access information instantly when they want to, when they need to, and just have it sort of part of the fabric and woven into that workday, you get the ideal situation where not only are you delivering something you need them to have to be top performers, but allowing them access for the things they want to do. So it is that combination, and there are lots of ways to do that. Now, fortunately, technology has made all of those things possible in organizations, and the fear of allowing employees access to information instantly at the point of need has rapidly dissipated. It's no longer controlled. As Leah said, it's everywhere, and it needs to be everywhere.
Yeah. So a lot of historical, education and training, most of it in the professional levels used to be handled by universities. We're now talking, we've gone through, more than half of the panel section without really talking about the role of historical higher education institutions in this new world. Leah, is there a role?
There better be. I mean, I think we're in trouble if they don't embrace it, right? And the reason why I think it's important for academic institutions to play a role is because I think they're in the best position to scale the training and the learning that we're going to need to have over the course of a lifetime, but also over the population. I mean, there's nobody in a better spot to be able to do that than the schools that exist today, right? The other reason I think it's important for schools to play a role here is that when we talk about employment, I mean, what is this? The statistic is something like 9 out of 10 jobs are mid to small level companies, right? They're in the best position to actually work with target and partner up with those mid to small companies because they're local. So I think from those two perspectives, it's absolutely critical for them to do that. The third is, I think they're going to need to do it for almost their pure survival, right? I mean, if we've talked a lot about lifelong learning here. If you think about that there are people that are born today that are going to live to be 150 years old. Let's just put that in perspective, right? That's at least 100 years in the workplace. Thank God that's not me. But that is 100 years that people are going to have to prepare for a job. And yes, employers can potentially do that, but if you're a school, the value of that degree is shrinking, and the opportunity around what you can do with them after they get that degree is expanding. So just from the pure survival, they're going to have to do that. But I'll leave you with one sort of final note, which is I'm not sure they really quite know how to do that yet. Right? I think that there are some examples of where that work is happening and where it's playing out well. But I think that the bulk of academic institutions are struggling with it. I think there are a lot of people that still don't acknowledge that is their role, or that they think that is important for them in the future. And I think that's where things are really going to come to a head.
Cool. You took me very excitingly in a very different direction than I was going to take it. Because it's good that we have rooms where people are represented by university folks as well. Adam, you have customers who are universities and companies. Do the universities get it? Do they know how they need to play in this new world?
I think
knowing that some of your customers are in the room.
Yeah, I think some of I think university partners certainly get it in the sense that they understand that the foundations of what they're teaching and the areas that they're teaching in, like almost all of those things are built off of sales, marketing, engineering, physical sciences, material sciences. Those are all built off of the basis of academic research, right? So they are certainly the leading edge on where these fields are going, how they're evolving, what the literature is telling us about these things. They're maybe not that great at delivering them as fast as we would like, as modularizing them, but that's part of our job, right? Is to take those to break them into smaller pieces. I think the last thing they do is assessment and evaluation of what have I learned and what is that worth. There's really no better proxy than traditional sort of university names behind that, right? So until a better system comes along to evaluate, like, what have I actually accomplished? And it's not going to be binary, right? It's going to be some combination of this sort of credit-backed memo of a brand name with practical application of it inside the workforce.
So there is a role, and that role might include a lot of assessment and a lot of signaling until somebody develops a better solution for skill signaling. David, do you have any perspectives on that?
I appreciate you working the question in that direction and lobbing it up for me to take a swing at. Yeah, I mean, my lifelong passion has really been around skill signaling. That's what led me to start Degreed, and I think, someone tell me about your education and they tell you where they went to university. And, that's crazy. That's really absurd. Like that, to answer, tell me about your health, and you say, I ran a marathon 20 years ago. That's an absurd question to how healthy we are, just as saying where we went to university is an absurd answer to tell me about your education. And really, hold the belief that the market wants to speak the language of skills, but it can't. So it is left to speak the language of college degrees. But it really does come back to sort of then that question around language. Part of the reason why we can answer in 4 seconds with sort of our college degree is because it's common language. And there is no common language for skills. And so, there's 2 parts of that. To move to a future where we can speak to our skills, one, it has to be transparent. It has to be something that is codified and that I can reflect and signal and say to you and convey. But even that falls short. It has to be common language. And so that is ultimately the future that we must get to, is a common language for skills. And for that to happen, there has to begin to be coordination. There has to begin to be standard setting. There has to be interoperability. And there's a lot of great work going on out there sort of to that end. The Lumina Foundation has built their framework for credentials and sort of their 8 levels of mastery of competencies. And, really I think there's, but that's where we have to get. Right now, the world only has one credential that is universal, and that is the college degree. So if I tell you I'm a JD, you tell me you're an MD, you don't have to know about law, and I don't have to know about medicine to know your level of accomplishment. It's the only credential in the entire world that has universal context. There's credentials that are ubiquitous and valuable. So if I tell you I'm a CPA, you might know what that means. It's valuable, it's ubiquitous, but it is not common. If you don't actually know about the world of accounting, you don't know what that signal actually means. If I tell you I'm GGNA certified, how many of you would know? Does anyone in the room GGNA? It's just as ubiquitous and valuable in its vertical as the CPA is in accounting. So it goes to show that there can be value and ubiquity without being common. For us to get to a future where the signal becomes around skills, it has to be common.
Anybody want to take a crack at that worldview? We're gonna let it.
I don't know. I just got a very depressing picture of, hi, I'm Kevin Johnson, GGNA, certified Scrum Master, et cetera. It seems, in some ways, it's depressing. It's just defaulting to your university. But yes, but with the fundamental level, I agree that we're moving away from a world where it makes sense to trot out your degree from 20 years ago.
Yeah, but we've sort of defined maybe unintentionally, but we sort of defined the university role as the fundamental skill signaling role, and maybe with more than just a college degree with letters behind it or a different taxonomy. Is that the only role for universities in the new future of learning and work?
No, I mean I think we're starting to conflate the university brand name with the paper that they produce, right? And the reality is that the brand name and those university partners represent teaching standards, right? Represent faculty. They represent a body of work and sort of expertise that extends beyond just the degree they deliver. So I totally agree that it makes zero sense to judge me based on the fact that I have a BA in German literature, right? It's kind of useless for the last 25 years of my career, but it does. But if I told you that I had a MicroMasters from edX, right, and I told you where it was from, I think over time we can push these things together of a brand which signals some level of confidence in the assessment, which could be a degree or a micro skill or some other building block. And what we really should tie together here is that employees and employers are going to expect these things to be continuous and ongoing and freshened over time, and that's what's going to matter is, what have you accumulated over your last few years that signal what you're capable of doing right now?
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that because one thing that we haven't talked about is there's this whole world of ongoing, fresh content that's happening all the time. There's a plethora of free learning content available on YouTube. There's education resources for no cost in sort of tons of places. Yet, as far as I'm aware, sort of everybody on this panel is sort of selling something. So Carol, let me start with you. Like, if there's increasing content for free sort of everywhere, why are companies working with Axonify? What are they getting that they can't get for free?
Well, what they can get is an understanding of exactly what content is, in fact, moving the needle for their business. So, it's in the realm of big data where you can measure now what people know and don't know very specifically and surgically fill knowledge gaps person by person to change that behavior to get them to be top performers in the workplace. And we can tell you exactly what content is doing it. So there's lots of great content out there that employees will want to have, But if you knew as an employer that 3 topics among the 50 that you've created are the 3 topics driving 40% of your revenue, then you know what to focus on. And you can make the other stuff available, but you know what to double down on in order to move that needle. So that's why companies buy Axonify, is we can give them that surgical level of detail that focuses the right content to the right job in a way to the person that changes their behavior very quickly. So lots of great content, and lots of content that people consume that does in fact augment behavior and change behavior in lots of positive ways, and lots of content that employees want to get. But it's the stuff that matters is the reason why companies buy us.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, a combination of curation and big data and tracking the results.
Absolutely.
That's what they're getting from Axonify.
Yeah.
What are they getting from Pearson?
Well, when I think about the concept that there's a lot of free content out there, I mean, content is abundant. I think expertise is scarce. And certainly, I think the way we sort of look at it at Pearson is that you need a combination of a lot of things to make that pathway for a learner as fast as you can possibly make it and as effective as you can possibly make it. And that comes down to having great curated expert content that's vetted and pulled together to make that pathway of learning very easy for both the institution and the professor and the learner. You need to have the assessment, you need to have the data around that to be able to figure out when do you intervene, when are the most important moments in time when you can actually impact a student's life. And that is related to the content, sometimes not related to the content, but that sort of data view and that assessment view, both summative and formative, is critical, we think. And then we also think that there's a layer of personalization that comes into the whole idea of the learning pathway, right? And that's part of what makes it effective, and it's part of what makes it faster. So if you're a learner at almost any level, if we're able to provide you with the technology that says, actually, hey, we can see that you know this, so you can actually now move to this topic or this idea faster, quicker, that's hugely valuable to a learner, very valuable to an institution, and you don't get that with the open stuff. I mean, in the end, look, if the pilot that's flying my plane says that he learned how to fly because he looked at a bunch of YouTube videos, that's the second that I'm actually stepping off the plane.
Yeah, well, hopefully you step off before the plane's in the air.
Yeah.
Just bailing
Hopefully
out.
he tells us
At that
before
point,
the
it's a
plane's
bad
in
result
the air.
regardless. So if I'm tracking, what I've heard so far is curation, data-driven results on what the right content is, some level of instructional design, expertise, assessment, personalization. Does anybody else feel like there's any other core components to your service that you couldn't just get for free?
I think Facebook also reminds us that free isn't free. So there is a cost to this content out there, and it may be hidden, and or become less hidden and may be very negative. But just the idea that an advertising-driven platform would be appropriate for education, I think, is something we struggle with, both in terms of it's not a great educational experience to be interrupted by advertisement, but also the potential inherent conflicts between the advertisement and the education goals.
Yeah, and I think "free isn't free" would be a great slogan for Facebook. You should suggest that to Zuck. Anybody else think there's some element of the core competency that we haven't mentioned yet, or that you can't get anywhere else?
Well, I don't think we've talked about pedagogy, right? I mean, learning, learning. There is learning about learning, and that is something that universities ultimately do a fair amount of research on and deliver on, right? And so whether so certainly there's lots to be learned off of YouTube, but it may not all be built in the best way for the learner. It may not be delivered in the best way. It may not be all factually correct. There's a fair amount of pedagogy that goes into learning in general.
Okay, I'm convinced. You all have some stuff that you can't find elsewhere. So let me ask we've presented it exciting, maybe some elements of optimistic and pessimistic future of the learning at work, but it relates to each individual company's growth. What are the biggest barriers right now? David, what are you facing in terms of, why isn't Degreed growing faster? What are you doing?
Degreed is growing pretty fast, but I think where we see companies adopting it, it's really where they have sort of a worldview of the rate of acceleration has outpaced our ability to in a command and control sort of way, to accommodate the needs of the organization. So where there is an acceptance that we have to have an empowerment model, we have to have an agile model, we have to have a scalable model of education that is beyond our L&D's team's sort of capabilities, that's where we've seen the adoption. Now, companies that have not yet made that leap, that sort of believe they know what is best, they can decide, they can buy, they can administer, they can train, they can do so successfully sort of in command and control type way. That seems to be sort of then the barrier. And so I think, what will lead to more adoption, both a shift in mindset, but also industries that are haven't yet been caught by sort of that pace of innovation and change.
Okay, so you're describing the biggest barrier being an institutional cultural barrier, not thinking about training the right way. Carol, same barrier for you? Is that this is a mentality?
Mentality is the biggest one. I also think learning and development is just so rooted in what they know how to do, and what's always kind of they think worked for them. They're just not sure how to be strategic enablers in their businesses, and they're waking up to it. But it's the LMS is a security blanket in a lot of ways, and shifting the mindset, as David mentioned, pretty dramatically is a big leap for some organizations and people who've been there for a long time. So it's that, and it's also just lack of knowledge about how to do it at all.
Everybody agrees that it's know-how, culture?
I'm new to the industry. I'm not sure I know yet, but I think there is an element here of talking about shifting L&D from being sort of a training center and a cost center to being a benefit. And I think more and more companies are looking at it as a benefit that's about meeting the needs of your employees and growing your employee base along the needs of your business. And if they think about it that way, then they're more open to less command and control and a little bit more of let a thousand flowers bloom.
All right, so we've spent, we're almost done. We have time for one or two questions. We spent the entire time, sort of with the domestic lens. Is there a new world is a new world of learning at work, only a U.S. problem, only a North America problem? Is it a global problem? If it's global, Kevin, how is it different in different markets?
Sure, it's global, and it's pretty radically different country by country, and even within a region, there's no one picture. I'll take Asia just maybe as an extreme, where you have Japan at one pole, which has a very sort of stable middle class and a stable learning and development culture, where essentially every respectable company has their own L&D organization, if not their own company within a company, that's developed rigorous training programs that takes people through in a very standardized way, in person mostly, sometimes online. And there's a set path that you go down this career path and training path together. And I'll contrast that with China, which is, probably is the largest and is certainly the most dynamic, robust learning market in the world, where you have essentially an entire population that's a population of immigrants out of, into a capitalist system and a complete social upheaval and social mobility. And so everybody's trying to learn everything. You have everyone who's achieved something in the middle class, they're anxious, they're going back, so they're trying to self-improve. People who haven't made it yet are seeking out learning to get there. Companies are trying to upskill, they're developing training, they're going to third parties, universities and governments are all trying to figure it out. So it's a very vibrant, dynamic market under development, and wildly different. You can take that sort of country by country and see different spots on the two ends or in between.
No, it's interesting. It makes sense. So Leah, you work with multinational companies. If it's different in different markets, how does one company sort of manage training globally, given that the market conditions in each country they operate might be very different?
Very carefully. It's very difficult. I mean, you have to have, I think the approach that we have is that you have to have embedded expertise within the country. You have to basically run the businesses out of those countries. And then what we try to do is scale as much of sort of the backbone of what we do as possible, but know that it inherently it's going to be customized pretty significantly for every country, every region, every employer once you get out beyond the US.
Which is another thing YouTube can't do for free. So I was told that no matter how engaging or interesting this conversation was, I have to cut it off exactly on time. So we are exactly on time now. And look, the red flag. So please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists.